I'm John Himes. I'm the director of The Smashing Machine.
And John Greenhalgh, producer of The Smashing Machine.
Right off the bat, the music that you're hearing here is by the Boxhead Ensemble.
Braden King.
Braden King, musical supervisor, and Michael Krasner was the composer. And I mention it now because we're hearing it, but also because I think that was pretty significant in our decision of what direction we wanted the movie to go in, choosing a more of a kind of ambient textural score. And I think that one of the things, there's a quote that I heard from Cliff Martinez, who is the composer for Traffic, which is another great sort of textural score. And he said music should never reinforce the obvious. And I think that that's something we try to do in all aspects of this film, but especially the music was a big thing. You normally would assume with a fighting movie that there'd be sort of a hard driving rhythmic score. But I think we decided early on that the action and the sounds and noises that came out of the situations themselves should sort of drive the rhythm, and the music should lay behind that. And I think these guys did a fantastic job. I think it really defines the tone and feel of the movie, for sure.
Yeah, everybody mentions the music.
Yeah, it's definitely
not what you're going to expect.
Right, and it was a tough thing while we were making the movie, while we were putting it together to get that music right. I mean, we heard about these guys from seeing Braden King's excellent documentary film Dutch Harbor, where he did the same thing with the Boxhead Ensemble. And the way they work is they do long, improvised recording sessions, and then we would sort of choose from those sessions pieces and kind of assemble it almost the way you do a documentary film, where you shoot long passages and then choose moments. But it took a while to get all the moments right, and as John will remember, we actually doubted ourselves at one point and did an entire cut of the film, which was heavily scored with hard-driving rock and roll music.
Yeah, which was eventually helpful. But I think the thing with the music was that we had kind of selected the music so early on, we didn't even know yet what the cut was going to be like. And there were a few cuts of the movie that we did where the music really didn't work. But luckily, as we got to the cut that we all liked, we were able to fit the music in there to help the story.
And we ended up sort of arriving at by slowly stripping out other music we had put in and putting back all the Boxhead stuff, until by the end we realized we didn't want anything else, and the movie could survive what some might think is kind of a somber, melancholy score at times. And I think it makes the movie.
Here's Dr. Rob being completely bamboozled.
Here's Dr. Rob, who I don't think was entirely comfortable with us being there, but
rightfully so.
Yeah, rightfully so. But sometimes you walk in and you ask people if you can film, and they find it hard to say no real quickly. If one of their patients is demanding it. This was actually at one time the first scene of the film, and I did like the idea of having sort of witnessing the carnage before you kind of see what went into creating the carnage. But that was one of our main challenges with this story of Mark, which is in many ways a downfall and redemption story. But one of the main challenges is to build him up first. We have to let you know what he's all about and what he's accomplished and capable of before we can start stripping him down and showing what's really going on in his life.
People always point out this woman here, and I can see why. I think she's great for the movie of kind of representing general opinion on the sport.
Yeah, she's kind of, I think in this film she may be one of the only people in the entire film who's not inside that world.
Yeah, maybe her and Kerr's father.
Yeah, Kerr's father and Darren. but I think here's another thing is Eddie Goldman. This was a later addition to the film as well, and he is actually the one guy who has no relation to anyone in the film, into the direct story of the film. And this sort of brings up the direction of the style of the film, which was we very much wanted it to be a subjective story about Mark, from Mark's perspective, everyone in the movie being someone in or around his world and his immediate world. I don't mean the world of Ultimate Fighting. But one of our immediate challenges was that we needed the viewer to be up to speed on what Ultimate Fighting was. We couldn't take it for granted that everyone knew what that was. And Eddie Goldman proved to be the device to impart not only what Ultimate Fighting was, but who Mark Kerr was, and to hear from someone else, somewhat objective, some kind of authority, that he was really the top of the world. I think if someone says that about themselves, it's harder to take their word for it, but when somebody else says it, it's you can believe them.
The very first cut that we did of the film, we didn't have Eddie Goldman, and we kind of stayed really, really tight in on Mark and Mark's world and gave you very little explanation about, the world that he was involved in and fighting. And it, to me, I thought it was a great cut. I liked it a lot, but what we found was when we started showing it around to people were missing key elements because they didn't understand what was happening.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's kind of the struggle between verite documentary and which is really being a fly on the wall and watching things happen and observing them, versus a more I guess it was standard sort of academic documentary where there's a lot of talking heads and people giving you voiceover. And we tried at first to be real pure with the verite, and then we kind of swung the other way too far. And I think our final balance was that we needed to incorporate a little bit of both, but still let the piece have the drama of a story that's unfolding.
It's Toledo, Ohio. We had a good time in Toledo, Ohio. Bunch of normal people out there.
Exactly. Yeah, Mark's brother Matt is a real good guy. Actually, quite a good bowler.
We went bowling with
him one time. He was
200-something bowler.
Strangely impressive at bowling.
Yeah.
This was
Beverly Hills Jiu-Jitsu.
It's funny, this scene with Mark where he's going to describe his first fight with Paul Varlins. In all this time, we had probably been hanging out with Mark for 3 months before we actually bothered to ask him what his first fight was all about. And I think that has a lot to do with the style in which we did the movie, where it was really just hang out with Mark and earn his trust, which we never would have had if it wasn't for John, because John had a relationship with him. And Matt actually is... John, why don't you talk about how the film started, the genesis of the whole thing?
Well, I mean, knowing Mark, he's a really open, honest guy, as you can tell now from watching this. And he's also a dynamic guy, and there's always something interesting going on in Mark's life. And I wrestled with him at Syracuse. He was an NCAA champion. I was a schmo, so I was a fan of his, but a friend. And
a nut flea, as Mark would say.
Yeah. Anyone who hangs on to Mark, he calls them nut fleas. It's a good term, I think. But, yeah, I had been following him. First he went directly into freestyle wrestling, like Olympic-style wrestling. He won 3 or 4 national championships, was one of the best in the country and even in the world. And then he made the jump to Ultimate Fighting. And I don't even know how it happened, John. I was sitting around. I mean, I always knew it was a cool story. I think I was sitting around in my living room with John, showing him the tapes. Some other people were there. And I think I just brought it up on a whim. And I said, what would you think about doing a documentary about this guy? And he said, if you can get in touch with him, I'll do it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had no interest in being involved in a documentary. I come from the narrative film world and fiction film world. But this subject matter really compelled me. And Mark as a guy, which is not, I mean, that's really what makes the film. There's the money shot right there.
This is, by the way, the point in the film when if people walk out, which some people did when we screened it, it was right here.
Absolutely. And this was critical that we got this footage, actually. We got it from Federico Lapenda, who runs the WVC or owns this footage. John did some haggling, and
it ended up being an absolute necessity.
I mean, yeah, there was no way the film would work without that stuff, because
if you can't understand the actual what you're dealing with here, the severity of it, then the story will not have as much impact, I think.
Absolutely. And also Mark Kerr, as a guy, as a really compelling figure to make a movie about. The reason why he's compelling is because he is such a soft, analytical, sensitive, thoughtful individual. That's what everyone is always amazed at, how Mark comes across, and that everyone who sees the movie talks about, God, I can't believe he's so intelligent. I can't believe he's so, thoughtful and quiet. However, none of that has any real resonance if you don't see him headbutting the shit out of people, and really what he's capable of in the ring. The contrast between those two elements inside of Mark is what, not anyone is worthy of a 90-minute film. Most of us are not interesting enough or complex enough, and Mark happens to be this walking contrast. And he really is a truly wonderful, great guy. I mean, he is all those things that come across, but there is a competitive side to him that is unlike most people I've ever known. I think he's more of a competitor than necessarily a fighter. I think this is the sport he was doing, and I think it's for that reason that his problems arose, because somehow deep inside him he doesn't enjoy hurting people, but he's good at it.
Yeah, he's kind of a guy that just fell into it. He fell into the way of things that he was good at, which anyone else does. But for him, the thing he was good at was a little different.
Yeah, and I think, we spent a lot of time with a lot of different fighters. And maybe this is an opportunity to talk about the fact that for a while we had spent a good portion of our time with Renzo Gracie. We just fell into him. Even though we wanted to make this a subjective story, there was a while where Mark's future was uncertain, and we knew we had to kind of branch out and maybe broaden the scope of this documentary, and we ended up spending a lot of time with Renzo, who is just, anyone who's ever met him, just a truly legendary, great guy. And trying to fit Renzo in the story proved too difficult, and we did a lot of cuts with him, and sadly we had to take that out of the film. That's why we actually cut a piece on him for this documentary, for this DVD. But the point being that Renzo is a guy who is totally fine with fighting. I don't think it affects him psychologically in any negative way. I think it's as easy for him as any of us going to the office in terms of emotionally what he deals with. And he's totally comfortable with it, and he's a healthy guy, a healthy-minded guy. And I think for Mark, he just doesn't have that same thing inside of him to be fine with really hurting people, or to be in that kind of struggle and that the kind of fear and everything that goes along with that, even though Mark is supremely talented at it.
Just to go along with that idea, when I went to college with Mark, we were a rowdy bunch of young wrestlers. There was fights all the time, and Mark literally was someone who didn't fight. He could walk away from any fight. He really had no interest in that. He was not an aggressive guy in any way.
Yeah, and it's the idea that Mark is so open about his fears going into the ring. I think that really struck me, because that's how me as a viewer is watching a film like this. What's going on in their head when they're going in there? And most athletes will say, we'll try to avoid that issue, certainly publicly speaking, because they don't even want to open up the thought of that in their own head. But Mark is very honest to a fault about his fears and insecurities, and that makes it even more riveting and compelling when you have to step in the ring with him as a viewer and as a friend to watch what goes on in there. You're suddenly struck with not, I don't wonder if he wins or not. You're struck with, I hope he gets out of this thing okay. And
Dawn was in Playboy lingerie.
Yes.
That we checked at. And it almost made it into the film. But,
Yeah.
But somehow it seemed irrelevant. But I wish it could have been in there because she looked really nice naked.
Dawn was kind of did a lot of those beauty contests and things like that out in Arizona. But yeah, what she did and her past, and a lot of people's past. There's a lot of people in this film who's gave us background information on them, and when you cut these things down, you really have to strip it to relevant information to the story. Which actually brings us to what we're looking at right here. This was kind of a tricky issue structurally in terms of when do we introduce the issue
Well,
of
actually,
the
you know
drugs.
what? Before even structurally, it was a tricky issue to film because Mark had just told us at this point about this problem. And, you know, we had been dealing with it. We knew what was going on. We were watching him really, you know, have a hard time with it. And I had asked him some time along the way, if you're going to shoot up, can we shoot it? Which was a hard thing for me to ask because it was really strange. But I knew, we knew it was part of the story, and the way I saw it was reality. And, if he was going to open that up to us, great. And
It wasn't even a planned thing. I mean,
it wasn't a planned thing. And the way it happened was really strange. We were sitting in his living room, and it was probably a few days after I had even mentioned it to him.
We were watching a movie.
Right, we were watching a movie, and he just came up to me. He said, "John, come in the other room." And I went in, and he said, "If you want to film this, just grab a camera and do it now." So I immediately went to John and said, "Okay, we got one shot at this." And he took the camera, and he got it.
Yeah, we ran 2 cameras on this film pretty much at all times. You could see these 2. We have angles on these guys. We got angles on Mark. Our cinematographer was Steven Schluter, who is a great friend and a great cinematographer. And the 2 cameras was a curse at times and a blessing at other times. I think that anytime you introduce more elements into the filming of a documentary, you're creating a larger group surrounding that person, and that affects the dynamic. I mean, sometimes it would be 4 of us crammed into a small room. A 4-man crew seems small by most film standards, but at times it even felt large doing this. However, the 2 cameras I don't think there's any way we could have done it any other way, because we had so much action to cover in this film. It's not, that was what attracted me to it in the first place, is that it is an action film. It's a documentary about a guy, but we're knowing full well that at least several times throughout this story, there's going to be a fight. And the longer time you spend with these individuals, the more at stake each one of these fights is going to have, and the more what is going on with this particular individual when he steps into the ring becomes incredibly relevant to the story. And the outcome of the fight actually is affecting their personal life as well. And all those things wrapped up together meant that we had to even be careful to not make our characters, and let's say Mark, and I call it a character because he's almost playing a role. When you're the subject of a documentary, you have to be comfortable pretending like cameras are not there. And you have to be comfortable being able to be in the moment when there is the unnatural situation of a camera crew following you. And Mark was a natural.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, it wasn't even like, we did keep cameras running constantly. We had 500 hours of footage, and you would think that in the beginning somebody would be kind of closed off and timid, and eventually they would get used to it and they would open up. But with Mark, that really wasn't the case. He was pretty much unaware of the cameras from the get-go, I felt like.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of guys and people that we spend time with that were quite the opposite. you always, when looking through the footage, catch them turning and looking at the camera.
Oh, this woman's face was designed by Jim Henson of the Muppets, by the way. She starred in The Dark Crystal.
She is Eugenie.
Eugenie,
Eugenie,
yeah,
I think.
right. Yeah,
she was Igor Vovchanchin's interpreter, and I would think maybe a manager. She was just great.
Underground sex slave. Those boots, I don't know what it is about those boots, but they got all of us in a tizzy.
We had to put them in the movie, and every girl in Japan is wearing those.
Yeah, and they jog all over the city. They don't walk. Japanese women jog wherever they're going.
I mean, actually, there was a thing that I heard that apparently a lot of these girls in Japan were breaking their ankles because they wear these high-heeled boots. They had a real uniform. It was the high-heeled boots, the trench coat.
And the small skirt.
The small skirt and the cell phone.
Yeah.
Cell phone always attached to their ear. So that was, Japan was a trip, for sure.
Obligatory gold chain. Anyone who lifts weights or works out or have to wear a gold chain.
He's going to kick your ass, John. There's Dawn in the locker room.
This locker room, I have to tell you how strange that was when we walked in. I mean, it was strange that Dawn came along to a fight anyway. It just seemed a little odd to bring your girlfriend. But we got into that locker room, and she was wearing jeans and a T-shirt or whatever, and she went behind, like, a dressing board or whatever the hell you call it, and she came out covered in sparkles, and the entire room smelled like overwhelming perfume, and Mark were sweating, and the smell of her perfume was mixing with the smell of their sweat, and I was really losing my mind in there.
And yeah, and it's really not even a knock on Dawn. It's more, I mean, it was really Mark to even allow her into that situation was inviting chaos. And, you know, it's something we learned from being around these guys.
If you look at the back of his shirt there, that's a Japanese shirt that they made, that they did a dot-by-dot drawing of his face, and he looks more like Arnold from what's that show?
From Different Strokes.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a great shirt, and actually the bird on his name. I mean, the Japanese humor is sometimes hard for us to relate to, but the bird sitting on the name Kerr is actually supposed to represent the birds that, there it is, the birds that ride on the back of, like, rhinoceroses.
Like, because peck off the bugs.
And the word they used was large mammal, because Mark is a large mammal. So there should be a bird sitting on top of his name.
Yeah, it didn't make sense to Mark.
I think it makes perfect sense.
To us.
What are you talking about?
Oh, well, I don't get it.
All right, here we go. Here's a fight, and this is a perfect opportunity to bring up one of the major elements of manipulation that we use in this film, which was sound design. And our sound designer, or let's just say the company that did our sound, is Diggit Audio in New York City. Our mixer was Tom Effinger, and our sound designer was Nick Montgomery, sound editor as well. And they had a big task before them, because when you take a fight that lasts for, say, 20 minutes and you reduce it to 2.5, 3 minutes, you have to construct the sound in a way that allows the viewer to understand the narrative of the fight. And I'll say this also because the Japanese crowds are notoriously quiet. They don't make much noise except at certain moments. So it was up to Nick to work the crowd sounds. No crowd sounds that we used did we fabricate. It's all crowds from these fights. But he had to arrange them in such a way that would let you know what's the beginning of the fight, what's the middle of the fight, and what's the end of the fight, and how is the fight going. Who's winning, who's losing. To the average viewer, they may not always figure that out, because these don't look like a normal street fight. So I think so much of what sells this action, so much of what makes this action even seem brutal, is the sound. I said that we actually didn't do anything fake, but the truth is we also did a lot of Foley sound, which is actually like additional recorded sounds to to heighten the action. And, you know, our mics are so far away, they can't pick up the sounds of a lot of these hits. Some of the hits in there, or a good portion of them, are actual hits. But a lot of them are also, we took slabs of meat and had them in the recording
More
booth.
than slabs of meat. We had a gigantic side of beef.
Right, John found this side of beef.
Yeah, it was big and bloody.
And we hit that thing with gloves, and we hit it with other bones and pieces of meat. And
we had this skinny little Foley guy who was the coolest guy wailing on the thing.
Jay Peck, I think is his name.
He was great.
He was real good, and he did a lot of the mat sounds, the feet scraping across the mats, because in the end, like we said, it's one thing to just put some loud, charging, Limp Bizkit music behind those fights, but it's another thing to hear the sounds.
Okay, here is Steven Schluter, our cinematographer, following Mark.
No, that's Mr. Ishii, John.
Yeah, that's Mr. Ishii there, who I think...
Do you have a story about Mr. Ishii?
He just got out of prison in Japan. I think he got indicted for some kind of tax evasion or something to do with K1. He owns the K1 fighting organization.
The guy next to Mr. Ishii, we used to just call Frizz, because he had a really interesting frizzy hairdo.
The interesting part, I think, about these shots it's the fact that in Japan here, it was the first time that we had started shooting with Mark. So Neil, the sound man, Neil Fazzari, who did a great job, and Steve Schluter, the cinematographer, who are shooting this here, had only known Mark for 3 days. And he had, right here, he just lost for the first time in his entire career. It was an absolutely devastating moment for him personally. And these guys kept the camera rolling, and they stayed on his tail. And you can see here he's obviously very upset and crying, and I was just in awe that they were able to keep that thing rolling.
I think, every film and this one are defined by just a few great moments, and this shot that Steve got here of Mark was something we kind of hung our hat on the entire time, knowing this is a great moment for any film.
Yeah, I actually spoiled that moment, although I think we did get enough of it, but I eventually walked into that locker room while they were shooting him, and he was crying, and it was too devastating for me. I asked them to cut the cameras.
Meantime, I was in here with Anthony Macias, Mad Dog Macias, and Igor. I actually left shortly after this. I started getting a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I don't think you were really allowed in there.
I wasn't too welcome. But we ended up spending the night out afterwards with actually Anthony Macias and his pal Andy Anderson, who is kind of a
rogue,
popular figure in the fight world. And they took us out and we went drinking and listened to lots of stories from those guys. Andy Anderson actually claims that his dick is the size of a beer can. I remember that was one of the things he claimed.
Yeah, but we tempted him to.
We challenged him. Our sound man Neil's doing pretty good himself, and we challenged him, and I think he backed off a little bit.
Yeah, he declined.
Yeah, interesting.
This whole locker room scenario, it was just tense because you got to figure we were probably in that locker room, I would say 10 straight hours. Probably 5 or 6 before his. Probably, 5 or 6 before his fight, and then a few hours afterwards, and it got really intense in there.
Yeah, this is actually a good time to address Coleman. Excuse me. Coleman, and the whole story of Coleman in this kind of brings up the idea that your film and the story of your film is defined by how your film ends. And Coleman and the way things go for Coleman demanded that we weave him into the story in a way that keeps you guessing and keeps him interesting. And the way we did that, it's certainly in the first half of the film, was by making his past a mystery that was slowly unfolding. So the first time we're with him, he just says that he's had a lot of bad luck. We don't tell you that he's had several losses. We just let you know that he's a guy who was champ and now he's having a bad streak. That next piece there was then to show you, okay, he's suffered a defeat. And the scene when we ultimately get to Columbus, Ohio, then we'll find out what the whole downfall of him was. And Coleman, the way once he kind of came into our world here, we decided that our movie was kind of like the tortoise and the hare is what I used to think of it as, whereas Mark being the blazing, fast, talented hare who rises to fame and fortune, but his erratic and unpredictable lifestyle can be his own downfall, whereas Coleman was the slow and steady tortoise, almost like you're not noticing him until the end.
I think this is one of my favorite scenes in the entire film. Just seeing the way these guys interact before and after the fights, it really lets you into the fact that it's just a sport like any other.
I mean, it's absolutely, this is how these guys are together. I mean, in very few occasions have we seen that two fighters are not hugging and shaking hands after the fight.
Only if they're Brazilian.
Then they step on each other.
Yeah, they don't get along too well.
Yeah, some grudges are held longer when you have sort of warring factions. But most of these guys are professionals, and most of these guys are fighting each other because there's prize money. That's the only reason. They have no anger towards each other. They actually have to manufacture anger because they really have no problem with each other.
And Vochanchin is kind of like the Kool-Aid man. He's just always got a huge grin on his face. I don't know what he's saying, but it seems like it's always something nice.
He seemed like the nicest, sweetest guy. He would just be around there. He didn't speak much English, but you'd always see him. I mean, that's another interesting dynamic, is that all these guys are staying in a hotel together. So the week leading up to the fight, we're seeing all these guys for breakfast. They're all getting the same buffet breakfast at the Tokyo Hilton.
Chicken balls.
Yeah, those chicken balls were delicious, and the kind of watery eggs, but the chicken balls were fantastic. And we usually had 4 guys crammed into one hotel room, and the beds in the Tokyo Hilton, I don't know how Ricardo Marai fit in one of those beds.
Yeah, I'm a small guy. I'm 5'9", and I was hanging off from the shin down.
Yeah, and we'd share a bed with another crew member. Usually we'd switch it off because, so it may be like Steve and myself would take a bed one night, John and Neil, and then we'd switch it up. So then, John could spend some time with Steve. I'd sleep with Neil. We all got really well acquainted.
There was an ongoing thing for a while there, and I think it was the real reason we would switch on and off was because I would hug people in the middle of the night.
Yeah, John had a sort of a midnight kind of spooning instinct, which was unnerving. I think everyone experienced it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was.
I think I was breastfed too long.
But yeah, I felt that.
We should talk about this point too, because this was really the depths of the worst it got with Mark was during this period of time, where it's kind of confusing and you can't really figure out the whole story even if I tell it. But there were points in here where he was trying to get off drugs before going to rehab, and it wasn't working, and we were spending just time alone, us and him, and really watching this guy unravel and constantly saying to each other, we got to do something here. What are we going to do? It really...
Like in this shot, for instance, he's actually detoxing from drugs unsuccessfully. He was trying to detox, and we were sort of trying to babysit him, and it was actually a total nightmare situation.
That shot right there is we had set up on a camera. I was staying with Mark at that point, and he was detoxing, so he spent 90% of his day on that couch. So I had the camera set up, and he knew it was set up, and I let him know that every once in a while I would flip it on, so he didn't know when the camera was on and when it was off, and we caught a lot of stuff like that.
And
sleeping.
I can't stress enough that Mark's honesty in revealing these incredibly rough moments in his life to us and to the cameras is why we have a movie here, and I think it's part of it is that he's a great, nice guy, and he was a good friend, and he trusted us. I actually shouldn't even say it makes a nice guy does that. I don't know a lot of people who do that. He's just an incredibly honest guy. But the other part of it, again, is that he was just really, I think he really trusted John and because of their relationship as teammates, and trusted that John was not going to take advantage of him. And it was their relationship that allowed us to get into his life like this.
Kelly Coleman there, she just came here recently, and that girl is very strong.
She choked John.
Yeah, we had a small wrestling match after the HBO screening, and I was like, okay, you can put the rear naked choke on me, sounds great. But she squeezed and literally screwed my neck up for like a month. That girl's strong. Don't let her fool you.
Yeah. So is that guy.
Yeah.
Coleman was kind of like putting Coleman with like changing a girl's diapers is sort of a no-brainer in terms of good cinematic images, because Coleman is one of those guys who...
Wonderful dancer. Does the hammer chop, it's called.
He's a hell of a dancer. He's also a guy that you could really tell when he is not doing well in the ring, when he was not on top, it's like he wears it on his face. He wants to be the best so bad. I mean, he talks a lot about it in the film here, but that's really Coleman. He's such a competitor that I think he's not a happy guy unless he's the top guy in the world. And as a result, everything about that almost defines his physicality. And I think that's what made him a really fascinating counterpart to Mark. I mean, it's amazing how you do a documentary and people end up fitting roles in the film. You have your protagonists, your antagonists, you have all these things, and we could not have come up with this in our mind, to these types of characters or story elements. You just find them in life. Here's, by the way, is Darren Farrell, who was a teammate of John and Mark. And
Jamie St. John, Ethan Bosch, Chris Saber, all good wrestlers, good friends of mine.
This scene, by the way, was edited by my co-editor, Jordan Mokrisky. This scene, I think he was really, he did this all himself, and it's a nice one. And Jordy was a great guy to work with. He's just a real good editor, a real fun guy to have around, and he was just a pleasure to work with. The thing is, when you're doing a documentary, though, the editing becomes it sort of merges with the directing job, and that's why I did a lot of the editing on this myself as well, is because you're making the shot selection, you're making the story choices, you're writing the script. So, I mean, in the end, it was really John and myself in the editing room, with the help of a lot of friends and other people that worked on this giving us ideas after we'd show them cuts. But we knew that we weren't really going to be able to get this right with a third party there. It just kind of had to be the two of us.
And John, I can actually say, has logged 500 hours of footage in his mind. You can literally say, we need this shot from this day and blah, 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 and he can find it in, 160 tapes in less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, we have all the camera rolls memorized.
Yeah, we never logged
No need
anything.
to write it down.
We tried to write stuff down, but it never worked.
Yeah.
Steven Schluter would always say, oh, yeah, we're going to put it on the computer. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. None of it ever happened. We wrote a couple things down. We threw it out. And that's why it took us 18 months to edit.
Yeah, exactly. It turns out good, but it takes a long time.
Yeah,
Some people might have done this in 3
Yeah,
months.
that is true. And I watched John Style, and he does go through every ounce of footage and everything. You watch it. Like, I used to go in there and be like, okay, cut that. And you'd be like, nah, cut that. No. He doesn't want to cut anything until the very, the end, till everything naturally works its way out of the film. And it takes a long time, but that is why this is the film that we made. It was really...
It becomes like, I always, I look at it, the editing process, as this happens with scenes and with shots, is that they're all sort of vying, they're all auditioning to make it in the final film. And so you keep them around for a while. You kind of do an elimination process where, okay, this shot's no good. This is going to lose out on this round. And it keeps getting closer and closer to the final round. So finally, you've reduced it to the essential shot. So, like, there's certain shots here that started out in our first cut, and they kept making the cut every time. And many obviously went by the wayside. But you have those ones, and hopefully if you really do go through everything that way, then you've left no stone unturned. But it is kind of a pain in the ass. It takes a while.
The key phrase being no stone unturned. Okay, so here we're going to talk about, that is Mark Bateman right there. And a lot of people ask me about this scene. Was it set up? Was it not? The truth is, I was with Mark Kerr, and, I knew that he was in big-time trouble. I mean, his life was in jeopardy, and I called these two guys who we all went to college with, who were his two best friends, and said, hey, your buddy's in trouble. So they immediately got plane tickets. They flew from New York, and they came and they spoke to him.
I think every documentary has its different way they're going to handle how intrusive you're going to be.
Well, I mean, and I think the interesting part about that is not even necessarily that it's intrusive. It's just, even if you're shooting the documentary, you are a part of it.
Right. I mean, we were a part of his life. We were actually the only people around him dealing with him at that moment. But there are other documentaries where, I mean, I definitely see documentaries, Academy Award nominated documentaries where they'll show a guy walking down the hallway, knock on a door, and the next shot will be inside the room, someone answering the door. So obviously it's been set up. The whole thing has been planned out. And nothing against that, but that was... I think we decided early on...
We never did that.
The way we're going to do it is we're just going to kind of follow the action and cover it. And we're going to record the action and record the sounds, and we'll conduct interviews. And everything will be constructed from that. That said, there's massive manipulation when you take an interview from someone and construct sentences with their words. But... hopefully you're getting at the greater, broader truth of the whole thing. It's just you don't have...
Your own truth.
There you go. You don't have... It is your own truth. It is our experience. It's our story of spending a year with Mark.
And we can't just glance over that scene because you have to know that when Mark started pulling those drugs out right there, we almost all fainted.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a sight. And
I've never seen anything like that. It was unbelievable.
Now, this movie, as we said before, the kind of every fight is almost a signpost. It signals the end of an act or the beginning of a new act. And this fight here, I think we all considered at times whether or not this fight should be in here. But... there's several reasons why it should be. Number one, because you want to show Coleman getting back on track and being slightly on the rise before that tournament happens for various reasons. But second of all, and we're going to get to him soon enough, because of Ricardo Marai, that's just a guy that was born to be...
a Bond villain.
Yeah, he's just needed to be in this movie. It was so ridiculous to see what Coleman was up against that it's pretty easy to get audience sympathy when you see that he's fighting against a guy that's like 6'9" and just looks like something out of a comic book.
Coleman calls him a silverback gorilla.
I think Kerr does.
Both of them, maybe.
Does he?
But yeah, he has thick silver hair on his back that doesn't really totally come through.
Yeah.
In the film.
He's just an amazing sight.
Ricardo Marai, we were around him for a while, really because we were with Henzo, and I have to say, it was one person that I really couldn't go up to and try to talk to at all because he was so intimidating. It was just scary to be next to him.
I mean, here he is. He's fucking fantastic. Look at that guy.
Yeah, I mean,
And he doesn't say much, and the thing is, even when your camera is on him and you zoom in and you're on him, you get nervous. Like I would look through our footage, and anytime we were kind of trained on him for too long, the camera would immediately like turn away because we'd get scared.
Yeah, I would go through the footage because a lot of times I would pull the shots in for John that he would cut with, and I would go through the footage, and it would be somebody who would be shooting Ricardo Marai. Then Ricardo Marai would turn around, and then the camera would immediately turn.
This is like Henzo's one scene in our movie, and I know people have told me like he seems kind of crazy here, and I actually, that wasn't the intention. I think Henzo is absolutely hysterical. He's such a great guy. I mean, there's few guys. We would spend so much time on this film in dire, harsh circumstances and feeling bad, and always say is, go spend a day with Henzo, and you immediately feel better about yourself. Anyone who's thinking of going to therapy, just sign up to do Henzo Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in New York City. And
it's on 30th Street and 7th Avenue now. They got a new studio.
Yeah, I mean, that's all the therapy you need. Just spend a day with Henzo.
He's definitely some kind of guru.
Yeah, and without being like martial arts mumbo-jumbo bullshit, like Henzo is not interested in any of that. He's just such a relentlessly positive, easygoing guy with sort of no ego. He's so comfortable with himself, and ultimately just a total badass he is. He's like a little warrior.
Yeah, he's cool, and he's got just a great lifestyle. He's really intense.
Just a real good guy and just fun. So I feel bad if we made him seem kind of crazy in that scene, but we really wanted to intensify the fact that Coleman was walking into some shit right here. And I think that comes across.
We tried to do Pride 8 before in this fight before, but the problem that we always had was, the truth is, Mark Kerr was at this event. He had just gotten out of rehab before this event, and he was at the event. He didn't fight, he didn't do anything but, go and talk to the Japanese. So we had always cut him into the Pride 8 scene, and somehow it just didn't work.
It was too much going on, and it was also, you didn't want to see Mark in that, that position, because it was such a humbling experience for him to go there and have to basically apologize to everyone around. We kind of hit on that later. It was
sad.
And it wasn't, it's not the way, if he's your protagonist, you can't have your protagonist being a pure observer in a scene, and then he was. So we had to kind of pass the baton and let Coleman be kind of a second protagonist here. And it also solves the issue of Mark is going into rehab, so this represents that time where he's out of the picture for a little while. And Coleman takes over, and by the way, this music again, I just think is great here. I love this music, and I think it highlights the fact that, from my experience, you should not edit to the rhythm of music. It's too easy, and it almost strips feeling and rhythm from the performances. You have to...
Let me just tell you, I just worked on a project with this guy, and it has no music.
Yeah, our last one has no music.
That to
right, and
to a different level.
I love this last shot too of Mirai, because in every fight there's a winner and there's a loser, and even the guy who seems like Godzilla early on, you always feel bad for the guy who loses a fight. It's rough, and these guys take it real hard. Their whole life is defined by winning and losing in these events, and if you win, then you're feeling good all the way until your next fight, and if you lose, you're feeling kind of shitty until your next fight. And that's
same thing with making movies.
Very similar. Exactly. It's just years in between sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know. We pulled up to Sierra Tucson here to shoot that, and I just know we got our shots, but we also got chased out by a security guard.
Yeah, it's not really...
Here, and while this is being shot, me and John are in a SUV arguing.
Yeah, we had a big... It's kind of funny sometimes when those cameras are... there's a few times where the camera was put away in the camera bag, but we forgot to turn it off, and you get to hear like sort of an hour of uninterrupted dialogue between us. It's usually good stuff. That one was an argument.
This is surveillance footage here.
Yeah.
John and Andrew hiding in the bushes, and Steve too, I think.
And we did not even know Dawn was going to be at that restaurant. We actually were at a location filming Mark having a meeting through the window of a restaurant. And across the street, Dawn shows up with her friend having some midday cocktails. And we were hiding because we didn't want her to see us.
And you know what? That makes me want to go into Dawn right here, because I have to say, you know, Dawn is a nice girl. I get along with her. She's cool. She's a nice girl. She got kind of a rough representation here, I really believe, because this is the time period that we covered, and this is what was going on at this time. But the reality of the situation is, obviously, you know, she's been with Mark for a long time, and she's put up with a whole lot of shit, too.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the thing about Dawn is that, you know, Dawn, absolutely, she was a nice person. We all got along with her. But I think what I could objectively say is that the two of them were really poisonous for each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic textbook AA enabler story.
Yeah, it was a codependency relationship. And no, of course, she's not the only guilty party. Mark was just as guilty in that as her.
Right, but like within the context of our film, we had to stick straight to our story. We weren't really able to give you, you know, her perspective on it didn't come out as much as.
And as you say, in a movie, in a documentary, just like any movie, people fill roles, and Dawn filled the role of the antagonist, and it was. We did not force her into that role, and we didn't manipulate that role. However,
There's no acting there.
No, it's not. And the point being that Dawn represented what was going wrong in Mark's life.
Well, yeah, and because Mark put her in that representation. It
Absolutely.
was like the second his life started getting screwed up, the first thing he would do would be to latch back onto her.
That's the thing. So as a viewer, you could look at that, and later in the film, everyone does. When she comes back in the picture, they view that as trouble. It's a sign of weakness on his part, and it's a sign that he maybe isn't so steady on his road to recovery.
And Dawn came to our HBO premiere, and I thought that was pretty vigorous. She came and sat in a theater full of people and watched the movie.
And I would even let it be known that Dawn now is, from everything I know, and last time I saw her, she's been sober for, I think, a year's time. I mean,
yep, she's doing really well.
She's cleaned up her act. So, you know, this represents a pretty fucked up part in a period of both their lives. And that's the movie we have. And that is, you know, I think Mark, it was a really interesting experience watching the film with Mark for the first time.
That was probably my favorite experience out of the entire process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was doing real well at that time, and we never allowed him to see anything throughout it.
Not a frame.
And I'm actually really glad we did that. You know, I think it was torture for him. I think he was placing a lot of trust in the unknown. And I think our feeling was...
Well, because that was literally when we stopped filming, he didn't see a frame. It was probably almost 2 years later.
Right. It was probably a couple of years. And
But he knew we were working on this thing on a daily basis. You know, I don't know how he didn't just fly here and break the door down.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing is that you can... If we had showed him early... I mean, I think that was my hesitancy towards that, is that once you show someone a cut, they're forever going to be... they're going to be tarnished by that. That's going to be stuck in their head. And we had a lot of really crappy versions of this film that didn't work, that didn't move along the right way, that represented a lot of different things. And I didn't think it was fair to him to put that in his head, because I thought once we got it right, he would appreciate it, whether there was some rough spots or not. I think he would appreciate the honesty of it, and he would appreciate that we in no way wanted to make him look bad. And I don't think we did. I think we presented him as he is. I hope we presented him as he is. And I think when we watched it with him...
Maybe a little better.
I would say not, actually. I would say that we... But that's another interesting thought, too, is that, you know, Mark is a real verbose guy. He talks a lot. He has a lot to say. And when you film... If you filmed anyone for a year in their life, you could make them look like, you know, the Pope, or you can make them look like Hitler. You can find any number of moments in any of our lives if we train a camera on you for a year.
Of course.
Where you're acting like a total asshole. If we strung up all your asshole moments together, we could make a great, convincing argument that you are the Antichrist. And so in the end, you really have to, like, there was an interesting thing. In that first locker room scene in Pride 7, I remember we had some great footage of Mark really breaking down and crying with Coleman and everyone in there, and he really was just breaking down. And I remember we showed a cut of it to some of our executive producers, and one of the girls that works for them afterwards said, God, why is he such a wussy? And I thought, why is it the guy, like, do you have any idea what this guy's been through? He's just been through a battle. He's a total warrior. He's breaking down. But what I didn't really respect is that, or wasn't cognizant of, is that she's just seeing the events as we present them to her. And if you present everyone in their weakest moments,
right, then they're a wussy.
Then they look like a wussy. So we actually had to take out a lot of that stuff because you're getting everything reduced down to a real short period of time.
Now, I'll give you the opposite of that. With Coleman, in our earlier cuts, we showed him rise to the championship. We showed Coleman kicking everybody's ass.
Right, his old fights.
And the story just didn't work because we needed him to be more of a wuss.
Absolutely. We needed you to not be aware of how powerful he was. And I remember we were always thinking, Coleman's going to hate this fucking movie, but he's going to feel all right by the end.
Yeah, because he's the champ.
And I remember asking him on the phone, because he's a proud guy, and I remember asking him to talk to the UFC about helping us get some rights to his old fights.
And especially the one with Pete, what's his name?
Pete Williams.
Yeah, where he got kicked in the face and knocked out.
And that was the thing. I said, Coleman, we'd like some of your old fights. He said, oh, sure, I'll get you Don Fry. I'll get you this, that. I said, yeah, great. Can you also get me Maurice Smith and Pete Williams? And I remember what Coleman said. He said, that's old news. No one wants to see that. That's old news. And I said, you're right, but we need it to tell your story. And I understand he doesn't want to be represented by his shittiest fights. He has so many fights where he's pounding the living crap out of so many people. You can't even believe what a badass he is.
Yeah.
But to show what a badass he is early in our film is to define his character in this story the wrong way, which is his character is a guy who was once on top, who has now fallen. And you needed to see him in that role.
Right, and we needed to make it difficult for you to see him rising back to the top.
Yeah, we have to make it totally like impossible, and it's
inevitable.
Inevitable.
Do that for a long time, and it was.
And everyone who sees the movie's like, I can't believe that guy won at the end. And it's funny because if you ask us, we would, we thought that he had a pretty good chance in that tournament. I mean,
Although I don't know, because it
was still
remember
surprising.
The four of us, John Himes, myself, Steve Schluter, Neil Fazzari, at the end sat down and wrote down who we thought were going to win all the fights.
Right.
And we got them all wrong.
But do you remember that we all said Mark?
Yeah, we did all say Mark.
Because we all wanted Mark to win.
We were so wrapped up in his
and
life.
that was it. We didn't.
Actually, I think I said Hoist Gracie. I don't know.
Did you?
Somebody did.
I mean, and that was, a documentary that we used as somewhat of a model for this was Pumping Iron. I mean, I would say a very loose model, but Pumping Iron is a great documentary, and what it is similar about this is that it takes a subculture of the world, of America, and a subculture that most of us don't take very seriously, and most of us almost look down upon, the world of bodybuilding. We usually don't really think too much about that.
You make them human.
You make them human, and then the trick is by the end, you're actually wrapped up in the competition, and you're wrapped up in the outcome. And by the end of Pumping Iron, you want to see how Lou Ferrigno's going to do. And you love seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger doing these massive mind games, and that actually intelligence can play a part in a game like this. So, our loose idea was to get you aware of this world.
Well, also because we knew Mark was the epitome of that you know, the opposite
Yeah.
of what he seems.
Absolutely. But I also think it was to get you to have a stake in the outcome of his fights. And that takes a leap of faith, because that makes, first you have to accept that these fights are okay. And I was real concerned about not making a statement for or against Ultimate Fighting. That's really, our movie has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with whether this is right or wrong. It just has to do with people who are doing this and what is their story. I mean, my personal opinion is, you know, I went into it thinking, having some thoughts. As I got pulled into it, you know, I'm a boxing fan, and I ended up actually becoming a fan of the sport. But I didn't want that to come across, because I also think that, you know, for Mark, being involved in this sport was really damaging to his life. I always wished that he would get out of it. And I wished while we were filming with him at many times that he would just say, I quit. That would have really screwed up the film, but as a guy, I really didn't want him in this. And actually on that level, which is funny, that when we started doing this, you know, John was much more of an authority on the sport than me. Let me say that I had no knowledge of the sport. John and our cinematographer, Steve Schluter, knew the world and knew the sport. And I thought, you know, it was a good combination, because I could bring sort of...
Our cinematographer, Steve Schluter, actually, he was tapped out by a girl in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, exactly.
One of Henzo's students.
That kind of thing happens.
Yeah.
So these guys knew about the sport. I didn't. I brought kind of objectivity to the table. But I always remember while we were going, I think that John often was worried about us making the world look bad. You know, that was some of his comments. And some of my comments were kind of more along the lines of, I didn't care if we made the world look bad. And I think in the end we sort of met somewhere in the middle, because... No, I didn't. I don't have a problem.
No, and the truth was, you know, I don't think, we were telling just a straight story. Which I mean, that's what's so interesting about it. It's like, you don't need to comment on the story, because our story is not the world of Ultimate Fighting. It's the story of Mark Kerr and Mark Coleman.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so within that context, like, the only time we really even had to deal with that was in setting up the story, you know?
By the way, the guy we just saw there who was talking was Boss Root, and we haven't talked about Boss. Boss is a classic individual, and he is a hysterical guy. He's a smart guy. He really knows what he's doing and knows how to handle life outside of the fighting world.
Yeah, he's got it all together.
I mean, when we would be in Japan and Boss would be there, you'd see Boss make the rounds at the breakfast table. I say breakfast because breakfast was kind of the big moment when everyone was all in the same place at the same time, and you'd see Boss go from table to table, and he knew everybody.
He's a really hysterical personality.
Yeah, he's just the guy.
And he does all the ring commentating now for Pride, for all these events. They put him in Hawaiian shirts and 14 beautiful Japanese women around him with palm trees, and he says, like, big, funny monologues.
Right, and Boss, I mean, he's also even done some acting. I know he was on that show Martial Law.
Oh, we saw.
And he was on The King of Queens.
It was so funny.
He's gotten into acting, and it's not a surprise. The guy's all personality, and he's just so. I mean, to even have him as a character to kind of step into the film as, okay, Mark's returning to his old trainer.
I mean, also, like, to have a character that isn't throughout the whole film is a difficult thing to do anyway. But he was able to do it because he was such a strong character. You know what I mean?
And we truthfully took out everything of him. I mean, I almost felt bad that we didn't give him enough
and
character
that was some of the
development.
last stuff lost.
Yeah, but everyone who sees it loves Boss. So even just because in the end we couldn't have Boss talking about himself. I mean, we have great stuff of Boss talking about how he got into fighting and his whole backstory, but it just didn't matter for this particular film.
And in particular, a really cool thing about pain, fighting and pain.
Right, because there's a classic fight. All fight fans know about it, which is, and it also shows how small this world is. Boss Rutan fought a guy named Kevin Randleman, you'll see is training with
Right
Coleman.
here, by the way, this is Coleman fighting what they call a cream puff.
And putting the old can opener on him. That's the can opener move. Coleman liked the can opener.
That's Sataki. He's an old K1 fighter who was pretty good, but get him on the ground, and you can tap him out with a nipple twister.
I mean, and the truth is that Mark Kerr, it was always interesting because we tried to figure out who do the promoters want to win this event. And Kerr felt they want him to win, and then many think maybe they wanted Royce Gracie to win.
I think the trick to promoters, the promoters need to make every fighter think that they're the one they want to win.
I mean, the Japanese fan favorite is Sakuraba, except Sakuraba's not big enough to win this whole thing. However, all that said, purely objectively speaking, I think Mark Kerr had the toughest road to the finals. That Enson Inoue, let me say, being your first round fight.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy's a tough dude.
Did.
That is a really...
And then Fujita.
Fujita turned out to be no joke.
How about, Vochanchin didn't have it easy.
Igor had no picnic, but Igor is just tough as nails.
So what are you saying about Coleman?
But I'll tell you what, I think... I'm not saying anything about Coleman. I'm just saying that Kerr had it tough. I think Coleman still had to beat Vochanchin. And that right there is... If you can beat Igor...
I know fight fans say, though, unfair because Igor fought 3 fights that day. Coleman fought 1.
Igor did. Igor fought Gary Goodrich and Sakuraba.
2, sorry. Right.
And then he fought Mark Coleman. He was dead. Coleman didn't have to fight a second fight. He fought Shoji, who is not nearly as big as him. So, who knows?
But Coleman was definitely in the best shape.
And Coleman was determined. That was
in
the thing.
Amazing shape.
When we got there at the finals and Coleman showed up for the photo shoot, the photo shoots were always my favorite part of the whole event. I loved filming the photo shoots and the footage we got from it. Just all these guys kind of presenting themselves in all their glory for the camera and presenting, this is what you're going to have to deal with. It's almost like they're presenting themselves to their opponent. And Coleman showed up for that final photo shoot at the Grand Prix finals, and he looked like a machine. He'd slimmed down probably 20 pounds or 15 pounds less. Yeah. He was totally ripped, and you knew this guy was determined. He wanted to win so bad, and I think that is why he won, is because I honestly believe he
was
wanted
in the best
it more.
Shape. Yeah, it's true.
He wanted it more than everybody. And
if the skills are around the same...
Now, this was big pressure for us filming here because...
if he lost, the film was over.
We needed Mark to win this fight, and this guy was no joke. Mark did dominate and controlled him, but Enson is a tough guy, and he's beat some really good guys.
We have to tell a couple stories about Enson. The first time we were there, when we got to Pride 7, Enson's Shudo belt, which is another fighting organization in Japan, had just been taken away from him because he beat up a reporter really badly.
Yeah.
He's kind of a...
But he's like a cool dude. I mean, we interviewed him. He's a nice guy.
Then, the other kind of funny story... I mean, he's great. Yeah, he was really cool.
Yeah, he's like real mellow.
He's a Hawaiian guy, yeah.
Yeah, he's a Hawaiian guy. He's Hawaiian Japanese.
Do you remember we leave? We walk outside of the hotel with Mark Kerr, all the 4 of us that went.
This is at Pride 8, actually.
Yeah, and Enson is sitting outside in a van, and he sees Mark, and he comes out, and he's like... Hey, what's going on? We're like, what is this guy doing sitting in a van, whatever? And it turned out there had been words said between him and some other... Horion Gracie.
Yeah, there was some beef.
Yeah, some beef with the Gracies, but Enson was there with, like, a posse waiting for this guy to come out of the hotel.
Yeah, Enson's just like a tough dude. Again, this world is filled with all types, and Enson is one of those guys who's a tough guy, and Enson is also... to his credit, seems like he will fight anybody. He's not afraid, and he's willing to go down in a blaze of glory.
I think that's what he's all about, right?
He really is,
yeah.
and I respect that. I mean, it's in many ways that's the Japanese way, and Enson is Japanese, and he's also he's Hawaiian. But Enson had a fight against Igor Vochanchin, which is probably one of the most brutal fights I've ever seen, where Igor pounded this guy's head until he was swollen like a pumpkin, and Ensign would not give up.
And not like, I can't explain to you how swollen. Like, the temples on his head were literally like 4 inches puffed out. It was bizarre.
I mean, the refs should have stopped this thing, but he was just too proud, and he wouldn't give up.
And in Japan, they'll let that stuff go, because that's what Japanese culture wants to see, that they like give it all for...
Yeah, they let it go, and so the fight ended, and I mean, he can barely stand up. And then after the fight, he was helped to his feet and went to center ring and handed a microphone. I mean, he literally can barely stand. It's like someone who's been in a car accident being handed a microphone. And then he went on to give a speech where he apologized to the Japanese fans for failing to be strong enough to win this fight. And I thought, this motherfucker is a badass.
Yeah, and hanging around people like that make you feel really wimpy. Like, I left work yesterday because I had a migraine.
I mean, nothing
These are the
ever...
people we were hanging out with.
There's no better way to reinforce what a pussy you actually are than to make this film. I mean,
and to hang out with these guys.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much bravado and machismo that you kind of encounter day to day, and when you hang out in your own little group, you may think you're kind of a tough guy amongst the people you're around. But being around these guys, you realize that the toughest guys in no way need to flaunt it, and in no way.
And well, I was gonna say, like, the way Mark is, it's so strange because every guy has that, you know, the way they deal with other guys and they front, and with fighters, it's way worse. It's way more intense. There's a lot of like bullshit to get through. And I wondered how Mark did that because I knew him, and when I saw how he did it by not doing it. He just completely...
I mean, Mark is the ultimate in not playing the macho game. I mean, you see Mark even dealing with other fighters and dealing with pre-fight interviews, and everyone's talking shit, and everyone's saying, I'm going to break this guy's jaw.
Because I think it's honestly not a threat to him.
Right, and I think it's actually more intimidating how mellow he would be.
Yeah.
I mean, Mark's whole thing is like, I'm not a badass, or he knows he's a badass. I don't need to tell you. I don't need to prove that to you. And so he almost was totally uncomfortable in taking part in the kind of shit-talking exchange that has become commonplace in the boxing world and in the fight world.
Yeah, they're trying to make it in this world, too.
Yeah, where it's just kind of the way they promote fights is have two guys kind of talk about how they're going to kill you. You know, Muhammad Ali started that, but Mark is just not comfortable with that. Mark, and whenever they try to, you know, there'll be all these moments at a fight event where the camera crew for Fuji TV has the camera trained on Mark, and they're like, you know, they want your big fighter statement, and some guys will say some big shit-talking thing. And
he has sent you a message.
Yeah, exactly. Like in that Ensign fight, the whole thing was that Ensign is going to break all the bones in your face.
Right, that was the message sent to Kerr.
That was the message sent to Kerr. And, you know, Kerr just kind of...
shrugged it off.
Yeah, he shrugs it off. I mean, you'll even see one of the deleted scenes on this DVD how Mark deals with that type of questioning. I love the audio quality of this scene. Two guys in a big empty gym. And
different than a gym, though. A wrestling room is different than a gym.
But this is and that's a big wrestling room, huh?
Yeah, that's a big room. But it's matted walls, so the smell and the sound are so different than, I don't know, it's
just that echo.
wrestling. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, these guys, both Randleman and Coleman were NCAA champs.
And at this point that we're filming right here, Randleman is the UFC champ.
Yeah.
He was training for...
He was training for his fight against Hizzo.
To fight Hizzo, yeah. Don't worry about it.
The story about Boss and Randleman. Oh, did I not even get into that? You're right. I left that one behind. Well, the story of Boss and Randleman is that Boss Rutan fought Randleman, and as I said, most fight fans know that that it was a pretty controversial fight. Randleman went out, took Boss down, pounded his fucking face in until he had a bloody nose. He busted his nose, and a lot of people thought Randleman won, but what Boss did is he weathered the storm, and he started being offensive on the ground, and he stayed in the fight, and he actually won the fight. But all that aside, the controversy, the amazing thing is there's this moment in the middle of the fight where Boss has a busted nose, and you see the refs take him aside, and John McCarthy, the UFC ref, says, "Your nose is broken. Do you want to keep going? Do you want to continue? We can stop the fight." And you see Boss making that choice, and he says, "Let's go." And the thought of going back to fight against Kevin Randleman, who is quite a monster himself.
They call him the monster.
They call him the monster. And with a broken nose, shows you that, again, you spend time and you hang out with these guys and you think, you actually get fooled into thinking they're just like you and me. But in the end, they're not, because they have courage mixed in with pain tolerance, mixed in with talent and skill, that they are literally operating on a different level than
Yeah,
the
it's
rest of
different.
us.
You know what? It's like it's a purely physical level.
Now, all this stuff we're looking
Not,
at.
I don't mean that in a bad way.
Oh yeah, no. I mean,
But
it's a more primal level.
Yeah.
Again, there's Dawn in her snakeskin outfit, which is always fantastic. And
Yeah, everybody likes this.
but this whole sequence again was another tough one to navigate.
Yeah, it was always a hard one for me because I really never liked when Kerr wore those fake glasses. Those glasses, they're not prescription.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
It was a look.
It was a look.
But it's also, from a story standpoint, really hard to put across the idea that someone is, on one hand, we have him, on one hand, we were telling a redemption story. This is a guy who went down to the bottom, and he's coming out of it, and he's going to be the champ again. But now we're in it, and we realize that something is not quite right. And we'd love to tell the story. We'd love to end the story at the Ensign fight. Guy went down, comes back, returns to glory, wins. And we could have. We could have ended the movie right there, and plenty of people might have. That's a real nice, clean story there. However, with everything else that was going at this time, with the Coleman being thrown in there, and also just to try and see this thing through and see how this final event played out, we had to keep going with it. And the truth was, things got a little shaky here. And
Well, you know what always makes me laugh is like when you're going through this period of time, you're thinking, we were watching Mark train, we were thinking, okay, he's a little shaky, but he's in shape and he's got a shot. We thought, okay, maybe he's going to be able to win it. And then we go through the whole editing process, and then you make the movie, and I believe I believe our own story. I watched the movie and I'm like, God, it's so obvious. Of course he wasn't going to win.
right, and then you also realize there's so many variables thrown in there.
Right,
I mean,
and one of the biggest variables is when you're spending a lot of time with this person, you're just naturally rooting for them,
And another thing is, and we're not at that point in the film here, but people often wonder what was going on with Mark in that fight against Fujita. Did he try to lose? Some people say he lost on purpose to let Coleman win. Some people, all different theories are thrown around. The theory that I believe is that I think Mark went in there to win because he kneed Fujita in the face as hard as a human could knee another guy twice, and most people would have been knocked out by that.
Yeah.
And I think that Mark, once he saw that the guy could take that, he realized he was in for a 15-minute fight and that he'd be in bad shape to fight another round against Coleman. I think his body shut down on him.
Yeah.
But I think Mark, and that's the thing about Mark that's kind of amazing, is that despite all the chaos that might be going on in his life, once he gets there, he plays to win, and he goes for it, and he puts himself out there, whether he's in good shape, whether he's in bad shape, and that always kind of astounded me because I thought,
you can't take the competition out of him.
right, and I thought, goddamn, if I was a fighter, I would not go near that unless I was in the best shape of my life. But some of these guys, and this happens in all sports, some people train real hard and they're known as great trainers. Frank Shamrock's known as a fighter who's always in great shape. But there's lots of guys who don't always fight at their top shape. They'll fight, some of them are in their, Coleman here is in his top shape. Some guys are not. And the fact that they're still willing to go out there and fight, even when they're not in their top shape, is almost more crazy to me than anything, than the fact that they blew off training. You know, it's almost more impressive.
Now here we have Shoji in his top shape, and it makes absolutely no difference.
I mean, Shoji is a guy who
He'll
is literally
fight anyone.
He's walking into the blender here.
Before this, Shoji came out in the press. They had this whole big thing. He made a will. He wrote up a will.
He does for every fight.
Yeah, and he had everything, I think, moved out of his apartment.
He goes into the ring prepared to die.
Yeah, he wants to die in there.
And you know what? I don't doubt it, because some of the guys he fights is definitely a strong threat to your life. I mean, not only is he... There's a classic fight of this guy, Shoji, who's probably 5'9".
I mean, it really is
maybe
that
5'8".
It really is that kamikaze thing. It's
well,
like
I mean,
the ultimate.
The fight between him and Semi Schilt, he fought a guy who was about 6'9", and there's an... You just see these two...
I think he's bigger than that.
He's like a 7-footer. You see these two guys at center ring, and the guy's literally 1.5 feet taller than him.
Yeah, we have a photograph that we kept in the editing room of those two squaring off, which is ridiculous.
And that defines Japanese fighters, for sure, if anything, is that they are willing to do anything.
Well, yeah,
it's the kamikaze
not necessarily
mentality.
About who wins and loses. It's about who has the most heart.
And they have a lot of heart. I mean,
they do.
Shoji's one of those guys.
And that's why they allowed Ensign to get beat that bad by Vochanchin.
Right.
Like, they wouldn't let an American fighter, they would have stopped that fight.
A classic example of that is Matsui. Matsui is a guy who spills a pint of blood every fight.
And he's pretty good, too.
And he's good, and he's fun to watch, and he will fight anyone. And Alexander Otsuka is another guy.
That ref we always called Eddie Munster, because if you look at him, he really looks like a Japanese version of Eddie Munster.
I can say that this fight, filming this, Steve and I, you'll see us throughout the fight, actually, with our respective cameras. This was a truly... There's Steve on the right of the frame. There's me. It was a really painful experience to film this. This fight in the film is, I don't know, 4 minutes long, but in reality it was 15 minutes long. And, Mark gassed out, but he also, there's those knees, and this guy takes it.
Yeah, a normal human being would be on the mat right now.
But Mark showed, on top of it all, despite what was going on in his life, he had the heart actually to stick it through this fight. And that was that's truly impressive, because he's not just like we were talking about the Japanese spirit, I mean, Mark has that, and he's not a guy to give up, and he's never given up in any fight he's had, even the ones he's lost. This thing was also, again, narratively speaking, people ask, gee, your protagonist doesn't win in the end. How do you handle that? How do you deal with that? Maybe you shouldn't put that in the movie. Like I say, people tell us that. But I almost think that the way Mark deals with this loss, and the way that he also in that conversation with Coleman almost gives him his blessing in a strange way, as if to say, I want you to win this. It was really an amazing moment. It wasn't something we could have planned for. And I think it showed that despite it all, the friendship between these two guys and the heart that they display is what this is about. And to me, it's not about winning a fight, because we are not defined by our successes and failures as much in life as fighters are, or professional athletes. I mean, they literally are defined by how much they win or lose. This is a great musical moment by Krasner and the Boxhead Ensemble. And, stripping the sound out here and just kind of putting you with Mark.
And Mark was directly involved in Coleman winning, because he did beat Fujita up enough that Fujita could not fight in the next round against Coleman, and he went directly into the finals.
Yeah, I mean, he got the assist almost. And I think that was the whole way this ended up with Igor and Coleman. Two guys from our first act of this film to be together facing each other in the ring is
We got lucky.
yeah, it was quite unbelievable. I mean, we can't really ignore the fact that what was on our minds this entire time was whether Kerr was going to fight Coleman. And that was kind of what we were thinking about this whole time. And it was...
Yeah, it seemed like a definite.
It seemed like a definite.
Because
Mark
nobody
had won
knew
that.
who Fujita was at all.
Right. And if he had won that fight, he would be fighting Coleman. And for the purposes of a film, of course, that would be the most compelling thing you can imagine. And when Mark lost that fight, can say for myself, I was truly relieved.
Yeah, I think we all were.
We really didn't want to see that happen. And in a strange way, I think the film benefits from not having to go through that. Because in a strange way, it's not about these two guys fighting each other. It's about these two guys and their friendship and dealing with their success and failure, and that in the end they are pulling for each other despite the fact that each one at one time or another has what the other one wants. And that's kind of that's a common theme in life, that you are around people or deal with people that have what you want. And can you be friends with those people that have what you want? This guy Gary Goodrich has
He's the most dedicated fighter there is. He doesn't miss a show.
That's a good way to put it. He's fought everybody. Coleman's fought him in the UFC and beat him badly.
Kerr, when I spoke to him yesterday, said that he may be fighting him in an event coming up.
Ironically, in Pride 7, that first event of the film where Kerr fights Vochanchin, he was supposed to fight Gary Goodrich. And it turned out to be Igor. And if it was Goodrich, how differently all these events would have transpired.
Yeah.
That's a scene with Kerr and Coleman that I just think it's simple and it's not overly emotive, but I think there's a real poignance to it. And now intercutting this between Coleman's match, it's funny that people watch this movie and don't realize that all these fights are happening in one night. And maybe at times we weren't totally explicit about that, but this is all happening in one day. I mean, Coleman has fought all these fights. Kerr just fought Fujita. This is all really happening at the same time. And this fight against Igor, they changed the rules for the final match.
Like 2 days before.
No one knew about it. And there was going to be no time limit on the final fight. So someone was going to have to give up. And then you put these two guys together and say one of you has to give up. That's a tall task. Thank God Coleman got him in that corner. And thank God Igor had probably just fought too many minutes that day.
Yeah, because that thing really could have went on forever. On that thing.
So here are the famous knees to the head. Some people ask, are these knees legal? Because the knees in the beginning were not legal, and a lot of people are confused about the rules. It actually is legal if the guy's back is to the ground. It's not legal if he's on all fours. Don't ask me why.
Although the controversy there is that his feet are in the ropes. When your feet are on the ropes, they're supposed to start you over.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
But I don't know. If you ask me, it was legal. He put him in that corner, and
He had it.
he won it.
And there's Igor. Even in defeat, he's victorious. I do love this shot of Kerr
I like that guy that jumps over.
getting stitched. I like that guy too. But this one of Kerr, I think we put this at the end because in its own strange way, it looks like he's kind of at peace with it all. And that's kind of it's a tricky thing because we're leaving his story in a very ambiguous place. And at least the finality of Coleman's story is able to give people some catharsis here.
Yeah, a lot of people asked for some kind of epilogue. But we didn't give him an epilogue because we didn't think it was necessary.
No, I mean, and here's Coleman with this enormous belt, an equally enormous trophy, kind of quietly alone. And then here's Kerr. And what these two guys are going through at this very moment is what the movie's about. Now, we did throw on these lines here, which are not too descriptive. They just kind of get you slightly up to date. So that's pretty much the story. I really like this last piece of music again that these guys did. We can talk about some of these people here. Steve Schluter again, one of our producers, our cinematographer, Neil Fazzari, our sound man, our fearless sound man.
Greg and Gavin O'Connor, Gerald McFadden, Michael Robinson.
Michael Robinson is responsible for getting us a large portion of the funding for this film, and Mike Masson is another one.
I love him.
Mike Masson kept us afloat.
Yeah,
for
a few times.
But the main crew was myself, John, Neil Fazzari, and Steve Schluter. There's Tom Effinger of Dig It Audio, Nick Montgomery, who I just beat in Tricky on the PlayStation, as we were talking about.
I want $2 off it.
Braden and Krasner are great guys, and they just did an amazing job. I really credit a lot of the success of this film to what they did. And of course we have to thank Dream Stage Entertainment. Those are the Pride guys. They allowed us access through much maneuvering and tense meetings.
Andrew Sicking did a great job, additional sound.
Andrew Sicking was our additional sound man.
Greg Magnuson.
But Andrew Sicking is great because you'll catch him in the corner of the frame of many shots of the film.
Taking photographs.
Yeah, at one time we actually had him recording sound and taking a photograph at the same time, which makes him a double threat.
There's my mom, also very instrumental in getting this film done.
Exactly. Angela Greenhouse, who will be the one person listening to this, what we're talking about here. This would be good. So I hope she likes it.
Oreo
is a dog we met at a motel in Arizona, and I'm just going to leave it at that. All right. Well, thanks a lot for listening.